Hey everyone, my name is Pedro. I'm gonna give hangouts on the topic Blazor. I'm gonna hopefully be done in an hour, maybe more, maybe less, but my target is an hour. I'll be talking about Blazor, SignalR, C#, web, and a lot of things related to those technologies. I'll try and speak a little bit slower because last time I think I was a little bit nervous and I just cruised to the presentation and that wasn't good, but hopefully today will be better. So what's on today's agenda? I'm gonna talk a little bit what is Blazor because a lot of people don't know what it is and I think it's good to give context. I'm gonna compare Blazor and some JavaScript frameworks. I'm gonna talk a little bit about client-side and server-side Blazor. I'm gonna briefly talk about SignalR because I don't think there is too much to talk about, but it's good to understand what it is. And those topics will be done in like 10 minutes and the rest of the presentation will be a live demo and hopefully I don't mess things up. So, okay, what is Blazor? Blazor, when I say Blazor, I want you guys to understand that it's a way of developing web applications. So I know we have a different targets of audience. Maybe some people already had some web development background, some don't. But I just wanted to say like Blazor is a way of developing websites without using JavaScript. So currently right now the most popular way of developing things is using JavaScript. You use your HTML, you use your JavaScript to do the front end, and you have the back end on a different technology. Could be C#, could be Java, could be Ruby on Rails. But it's my guess like 99% of the websites today on the front end side run with HTML and JavaScript. So you have all your backside logic, your connection to the database, your rules, all done in C#, all done with your backend logic. And on the browser itself, like the website, like what you see on your screen, you have a mix with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And Blazor is here together, and other technologies are doing the same, but Blazor is here to change the scripting language that you do it on the front side of things, on the front end of things. So right now with Blazor, you are able to develop the front end logic, how your site behaves. Let's say, for example, you want to make an HTTP call to your backend, you want to render things differently depending on the size of your table, for example. You can do it. Right now, the easiest way to do it, and like the most common way, I should say, is doing with JavaScript. Could be like using a JavaScript framework, could be using plain JavaScript, but the most common way is to do it with a JavaScript library. With Blazor, you're now able to use C# on the front end of things. So you could do the same thing that Node did when they brought JavaScript into the backend, because previously JavaScript was mostly used on the front end side of things, and when Node was brought to the back end, they had an explosion of popularity in Node that people said, okay, now we can develop the back end and the front end with the same technology, with the same syntax. So it was easier to learn how to develop, how to be quote unquote a full stack developer. And because right now, if you wanted, let's say for example, I'm a C# developer and I want to do some front-end development, I will need to learn a different language, right? I know how to develop my backend in C#, I know how to make a database connection on C#, all my business logic is on C#, but if I want to create a website with it, I would need to learn a different language that would have a different stack, and a lot of people like tended to say, okay, I only know front-end, I only know backend, because like we have those different types of languages and barriers that you have to go through. And when Node.js came into the backend, so they brought the technology that you had on the front end side of things into the backend, a lot of people adopted on the promise that, okay, I will only learn one language, and I will be able to develop both the backend and the front end side of things. So hopefully with C# and Blazor, we will also have this increase of popularity of developing both the front end of your application and the back end with the same technology, utilizing both classes and models both on the back end and the front end. So how does C# manage to run on the browser? Because if you have at least some experience with JavaScript, you will see like it's way easier to start the development. Okay, my JavaScript, you can run it on the browser console. It's the web itself is built to make it so it's easier to develop JavaScript on the browser, right? So C#, it's C# and Blazor, it's built upon the concept of WebAssembly. I won't go through too much on what WebAssembly is, but just try to understand WebAssembly comes to make it easier for you to run your code on the web, not necessarily JavaScript code. You can use, for example, you have multiple languages that you use. You can use C#, you can use Java, you can use Rust, and you can transform your code into a WebAssembly code. It's similar. It's like you transform your code into a code that the browser itself understands without having to transform. Let's say, for example, you're not transforming your C# code into a JavaScript code. You're transforming your code into a WebAssembly, which the browser also understands. Blazor also uses Razor. Razor is like another technology that if people had get in touch with ESP.NET, not .NET Core, but like they did some web development using MVC. They already know a little bit about Razor. So similar what we have with some other templating structures that let's say I think Django uses and special HTML template. Razor is a way of introducing logic into your HTML. I'll show it to you, but like it's an enhancement to what HTML is, at least on my opinion. Blazor also works on, it's a component-based framework. If you go into like Vue.js, AngularJS, and React.js, which are like the three main JavaScript frameworks to develop websites today, all of them have some kind of component-based architecture. So you develop smaller components and you put them all together into a bigger component. So you don't have to develop everything in one HTML. You separate your applications into smaller parts. And finally, Blazor, you should be doing most of your code, your front-end code now with C#, but if you also have the necessity of accessing native JavaScript functions, you're able to call JavaScript code from the C# code itself. So I'll go through again just to give more examples of trying to differentiate Blazor with JavaScript frameworks. So you have your standard JavaScript framework that could be React and could be like the plain JavaScript. So you would have your HTML files, that would define the structure of your page. You would also have the JavaScript files that would contain logic, for example, making an HTTP call, rendering the page differently. You would have your CSS files that change the colors, the font, and you would also have multiple JS libraries that would enhance your application, right? When we are moving into the Blazor framework, the names of the things change a little bit because we're using kind of different technology. Instead of our HTML templates, we have the Razor templates. Instead of JS, we are using C# now. We are still using CSS. Until now, we are not able to run from it, but it gets a little bit easier. But we also get all the .NET libraries. Right now, for example, if we want to parse something on JS, on JavaScript, you want to parse a JSON. Let's say, for example, a JSON arrives from the server and you want to transform into an object for your JavaScript framework. You would need to use some JS libraries that maybe you're not familiar with. But if we come to Blazor, all the .NET standards libraries that are available that you could use on the back-end side of things, you could also use on the front-end side of things. So that's a big advantage from when you're used to some libraries on the back-end side and you want to move into this front-end development thing. Using the libraries that you're used to makes things a lot easier, right? And now things get a little bit more complicated because Blazor have two sides, two ways of actually working. One that I really recommend and the other that I don't recommend that much. So first we have the client-side Blazor and the server-side Blazor. Client Blazor works more like your traditional web page. You have you have the Blazor itself, all the HTML and like all the logic is moved into the browser, and everything happens there. So like it's similar to when you access a web page, all the HTML and all the JavaScript is downloaded, and everything runs quote unquote locally on the browser. So like everything that you do is automatically transported into the browser. So for example, you shouldn't have like maybe the password for your database on the JavaScript for when you're dealing with JavaScript, because all the files are moved into the browser. Similarly, when you're developing client-side applications with Blazor, you shouldn't put your database connections into the C# code, because this C# code will be downloaded to browser. So when you're thinking of client-side Blazor, think of a more traditional web development framework. When you're dealing with the server-side Blazor, things work a little bit differently. We don't have exactly the C# code running on the browser. What we have is server-side Blazor runs on an ASP.NET Core application and uses SignalR, which I will talk a little bit more about it, uses SignalR to modify the DOM of the web page. So with the server-side Blazor, you are able to have, for example, some database connection and some sensitive data in your code, because this code won't be pushed into the browser. All the logic will run on the server, and the server itself will use SignalR to modify the DOM and have a responsive and reactive page. That the one that I recommend that I see more future is the client-side one, because the biggest disadvantage on the server-side Blazor is we are dependent on this SignalR connection to talk with all browsers. So let's say, for example, someone clicks a button on the server-side client. This button will need to will need to talk to the backend to see, for example, if this button needs to change color, right? All the communications and all the updates on the DOM of the website need to be connected with the backend differently from the client-side Blazor, because if the client-side Blazor, all the connections, all the DOM modifications are done by the Blazor code itself that's running on the browser. So if the changes doesn't necessarily need to be, for example, a call into your backend server. So if the client doesn't need the access to the backend server, all the logic will be in your browser, and you are not dependent on this SignalR connection to make any DOM modifications. I'll give examples about it later to hopefully make it clear. And now SignalR. SignalR is the communication that we use, that the Blazor server uses to communicate, but is also a technology that can be used independently of Blazor itself, but it's really useful to use it. So SignalR is used to make real-time communications between the browser and the client and the server. So let's say, for example, the browser wants to request some data from the server. He makes an HTTP call into the browser, and like it gets the data from the database, and then it updates a table, and that works okay, because the browser itself is getting the data from the server. If we have a different scenario, for example, the server has an update on the data and needs to tell the browser. The browser itself doesn't have a web server that your backend can make a call into the client. So like it doesn't, the server can't make an HTTP call into the client saying, please update the data because the roles has been changed. I received a message that my voice isn't good. Is it bad for everyone? I don't know. I'll keep going, but yeah, my voice is echoing. Maybe if I can, is it? I'll try and close YouTube to see if it's better now. Hopefully it improves. Please send me a message if it's still bad. Yeah, but SignalR is useful for making this type of communication, like those real-time web applications that need to receive updates from your back-end side and get updated. And I just received a message that my voice keeps echoing. Maybe I'll try to reconnect my headset. Just a second. I'll try and close more things. Is it better now? I don't know. I'll keep going, please. If it keeps getting worse, we can try something else. So SignalR, SignalR helps to create this type of like both wave communication. You are able to send messages from the server into the browser, and there are multiple ways of doing it. We can use like the traditional way was using long polling, which the client keeps sending the server again. Has anything changed? Has anything changed? We could use server-side events that are a different way of communication. We can use WebSockets, and SignalR is here to abstract all those three technologies, because sometimes the browser itself does not support WebSockets. Sometimes it uses a different implementation of server-side events, and we are able to use SignalR to abstract this kind of logic and make the communication between the backend and the front end easier. So I'll start the demo right now. I'll wait a little bit to see if my audio is better. I don't. I'll give an overview of what the demo will be about. I'll show a couple of Blazor applications. Like I'll show the template one that comes with Visual Studio. And I'll show the sample projects that come with it. I'll try and show a little bit of some fun stuff that you can do with Blazor. I'll talk about the components and how we create them, how you utilize them, and then I'll grab two applications that I built previously that utilizes the client-side applications and a desktop port of a Blazor application that I'll demonstrate how you can share your code on a website and an application running on your machine. And all the code is available on GitHub. On my GitHub, I'll share the link on YouTube right now, so if people want to check it out while I'm doing the presentation or later, that's fine. So no one said that my voice is bad, so I'll start showing now what a Blazor application is. So this application here, I use the latest version of Visual Studio to create it. So this is the template that comes with it. If we go, the easiest way to create one is using Visual Studio or the .NET CLI. So when we go in creating a new project, if we go with here, we have the different types of Blazor applications that we can create. We can create a server application, and we can create a Blazor WebAssembly application. That is the client-side one. I'll start first explaining things on the client-side app. I'll talk about the files that were created automatically. Then I'll show the difference between the Blazor service, and we can move forward. So first, when we create this application, we have a couple of folders that are similar to ASP.NET Core. We have the www.root folder with some CSS file. It comes with Bootstrap. We have some JS. We have the index HTML that we will talk about it later. And we also have those two folders that contain some Razor components. As I said, let's show it here. For example, we have this Razor component that has the HTML and that is like the structure of the page. Then we have like some C# code that I'll talk also more about later. And we have the app, the program. There are multiple files here, like the template that comes with Razor is quite big. So I'll start from the beginning. When you start your application, what happens, right? The application itself starts from program CS, and what it's doing here right now, it's registering the app component as your root component of the application. So we have the Razor components, which are like the building blocks of the application that we put everything together, and app.razor is where everything starts. So if we open app.razor, we have here what we call like the router app. So here it is a way of Blazor to redirect your page to for example, if you access the page /index, it will redirect your page to that app. If you go to /about, it will go to a different page. So here it's saying, okay, please start your Blazor application using this app. This app, it will simply change the different component depending on the route itself. And it's saying, please change the route using the main layout as a base. So if we go here, on the main layout, layouts are a way of introducing reusing layouts. How can I say that better? Layouts is a way of introducing standard ways of displaying your components. So let's say, for example, all your pages will contain a header on top of the page. You shouldn't necessarily need to add the header component on all your pages. You can just create a layout that contains the header, and then you can add your components to it. So here we have like the layout, we have multiple components, and then we have the first page, and we have the pages themselves. The pages are decorated with this annotation that says, okay, this page will be, when the application starts, it registers the app. The app itself, it's only a router that redirects into your page. And when we access the page /nothing, it will redirect into this component. So now I'll start the application, and I'll go back and forth to talk about what the application itself is doing. So now I started the application, it starts a web server, and it's serving the page here into my browser. So if we see it, I started the application, and we have like multiple things on my screen. We have like, I access the page on the /nothing, and then it's saying hello world. We have hello world here, welcome to your new app, welcome to your new app. We have a survey prompt, which is a different component, but also multiple things are also appearing in the page, right? We have the side nav menu, we have the top menu. How did this appear on the screen? This appeared because we defined this on the layout. So the layout is encapsulating everything on the page itself. If we removed, for example, all the layouts, all the layout part of the application, and we restarted, all the layout will be removed, hopefully. Let's see. Hopefully the layout itself will be removed from the browser, and we only have the component itself appearing on the page. So we removed the layout that was added from the main layout, and now only the component that is the page itself is now appearing. Okay, that's good. I'll go back to it because I think it's better to show with the layout. It's prettier. Awesome. Okay, so I showed you the layouts and the components, so I'll go now more about what a component is. So a component itself is like can be like structure and code and functionality and appearance. It's like, think of like smaller type, instead of developing your application all at once and all in one file. Think of developing your application in smaller parts that you can reuse. So let's say, for example, here I have a page which I've developed, like I put an h1 tag, hello world, I put just a text, and I also have a survey prompt component with a title, how's your Blazor working for you? So if we go here into this component, it has more div, it have more HTML, it had more components, but it also has a code. And what is saying here, when you're rendering the index page, saying, okay, render a survey prompt, is using this index, is using these components into this page. So if we, for example, if we copied this component, we are able to reuse it without having to copy all the HTML and all the code again. So like if we change the title, for example, different title, it will reuse the component using a different title, but like if we and I'll talk about parameters on components, but like this component is expecting a title and will behave differently with differently typed titles. But so we created here, like it's the same component, is the survey prompt component having a different title on when we are creating it, right? So we are able to reuse pieces of our website without having to repeat code. And this is like a way of how other frameworks do it too. This is what it's like, the component-based architecture that we are also able to use it on Blazor. So I'll create now a new component to showcase a couple of things. So when you're creating components, again, the easiest way is to use like the Blazor component from Visual Studio. It will create like, so if I create my super component, something like this, what it does is it creates the HTML with a h3 tag super component and somewhere that I can execute code. So I created this component, but how will I say, okay, I want this component to appear on this page? I can remove this HTML code and I can simply add super component. and I will do it twice just to exemplify it, right? So when I run the application now, what it will do is when I go into the page without anything after the slash, it will render everything. When it reaches here, super component, it will go to this component and create one component of it. It goes here again, super component, create a different component. So right now we have 2 components created by me. So what we can do with components, again, components are like form and also functionality. So let's say, for example, I'll remove a component, and I want to create a button that does something on the component. So everything that I said right previously, we can do it with only Razor pages. We can do it like using Razor with standard ASP.NET Core. We can do it Razor with Razor pages with Angular, but now comes what Blazor offers. Blazor offers the way of coding your application using C# on the browser. So right before, like only creating those tags were already possible with Razor itself, but now instead of utilizing the Razor component and JavaScript, we are now able to utilize the Blazor component and C#. So let's say, for example, I want to create a button on the super component, my button, and I want to add an event that I want something to happen whenever I click it. Okay, so my function, I want this function to be executed. Again, previously you would need to, this function would be created using JavaScript, using like some JavaScript framework, but now on this code tag we are able to create C# functions that are able to be executed on the browser. So let me see, I'll create it public my function, and then this function will be executed whenever I click that button. So let's say, for example, console log, clicked, and I'll start the application again. So I know I'm repeating, but like we have the index page that has a super component, and inside the super component we define an h3 tag and a button itself. So we have it here like the button that I created, and if I show it on the console, whenever I create this button, it should hopefully, yeah, it log clicked. So right now, all the logic that is here inside the button is able to be is C# code, right? We are not dependent more and on JavaScript, and there are like this is the main selling point, but Blazor also introduces like a lot of things that we are already used to having in JavaScript libraries. So let's say, for example, there's that data binding, like an easier way of updating your variables in your browser. So let's say, for example, I have a div with my name, right? I have a div with my name Pedro, but I want that data to be changed whenever I click that button. So let's say, for example, I can move that logic into the C# code. So I have a string that is called my name. I wanted that to be Pedro, and I want my function to alter that value, right? So my name will be Lucas, I don't know. So like instead of hard coding the value here, we can use like the Blazor notation and put it my name here. So hopefully it will work. So what I did was, instead of having my name being hard-coded in the HTML, it will start with a value of Pedro. So I have my name here, and whenever I click a button, the variable itself will change value, and it will be updated here. So I click the button, and now my name is Lucas. Awesome. So there are, and this is part of like, this is, I know that's not really cool, but like it's really useful. Instead of like having to alter the DOM yourself, having this data binding already given to you is a selling point on my perspective. We could also, like, there are other properties of Razor itself that we can use Blazor to take advantage of it. So instead of like having my name here, we can have like my name and my nickname, and we can create, let's say, for example, public string my nickname, and that variable will be a parameter of this component. So So here, like, and this is what was the survey prompt was using to change its title. We can pass parameters into our components. So in the index right now, instead of just creating a super component, I can create a super component passing a nickname. I really don't have a nickname. I'll just call it P. Awesome. So right now, when this component is created, I'll create both to exemplify it better. PAD. So like the components themselves are independent from each other. Like each component contains like the structure and the code of that's necessary like to run itself. So like I created two components, one that has the nickname P and the other PAD. And whenever I change the name of a component, only that component variable will be changed, right? The code executes only on the component itself. There are more things. I think we could use also if blocks. So we have if, let's say, if my nickname is equals to P, I will show the application, otherwise I won't show it. So like the if statement also works, and we can also do for each. So like for each, let's create a list of names. List string names, and I'll initialize it with, I don't know, Pedro and Lucas here. So like I can pass my list of names, name, and we can create like dynamic HTML depending on the for each of the if. So if I created an unordered list and I say I want to create items inside of this list that has the name of my list, hopefully it will compile and work. But what I'm doing here, like I introduce like two new concepts. I introduce the if statement that will only render this component if this is true, right? So it will check if the nickname that it was given equals to PE, and then it will render, and once inside, it will go through the list of names and render into a list. Awesome. So right, so we had like two components, one with nickname PE and the other PD. Only one was shown. And here we have the list of names that we dynamically created using the for each statement. And this is like we are mixing the advantages that Blazor already gave us, and we are using C# code to leverage it. What else? This is like those are the things that you can do with Blazor. I'll try now and show like the differences between like the Blazor server side and the client side. They are really similar, but like how they work behind the scenes changes a lot. So I have here a server side app started that, again, the easiest way to create it is going through the Visual Studio and creating the app itself. So I have here like my client-side application that I did the modifications, and I have the server side. I will show like some aspects of the client side. So as I said on the demo, the client side downloads all the code from your Blazor components and put it into your browser. So if we go here to the application, if we go into the cache, because it saves on the cache, and like all the DLLs of your code that you programmed in your Blazor are here. Similar when you're developing JavaScript applications, all the JavaScript that you do will be uploaded into the browser, right? So it's like it's not safe to upload like code that it shouldn't. I know it is a DLL, but DLLs can be reverse engineered, like to obtain the actual code. So like you're not able to create like client-side applications with your sensitive code. So because I'll delete everything. And can I delete everything? No. Okay, but if we go here to the network page, when the application itself starts, it downloads again the DLLs because here it has cache, so it's not downloading everything. But like the first time that you open, it will check which DLLs you need to download, and will download the DLLs into a browser. So when we're dealing with client side, it's really similar to when we're developing JavaScript applications, that all your code is on the browser. And when we go through to server side, I'll show like this actual code. The code itself is almost identical to what the client side is. We have like they created like it's really similar, right? If we go to the like we both have like this layout, the home component, the counter, and everything. But on the server side, what is different is how it's hosted. Because right now here we have like the files are similar, right? We have the app Blazor on the program itself. It's creating a little bit different, but like the Blazor components are the same. The difference is how it's hosted and how it's sent into the browser. So here the server side host is here hosted on an ASP.NET Core application. Previously it was only creating like we didn't have like the startup file. We are only using our WebAssembly host builder. Here we have a full .NET Core ASP.NET Core application that serves all the Blazor components. And the biggest difference is if we go to which one's the server side? Yeah, this one's server side. If we go to the server side, we don't have the DLLs. Hopefully, they shouldn't be here, right? But yeah, we don't even have anything on the cache. We don't have the DLLs in the browser itself. So theoretically, it would be safe to store all your sensitive data and all your logic on the backend side of things, because what Blazor does is it alters the DOM of the page using SignalR. It doesn't upload all the DLLs into the browser and the DOM updates happens there. Because if we see it here on the sources, we have like, and this is for the client side app, right? We have what they call like, we have the .NET JS, we have the Blazor WebAssembly. All the code that is required for the application to run is inside the browser. Like it will need, for example, to make an HTTP request to the browser, it can do, but like the code itself is here. Like if the server, like if your backend dies, the application still is able to start itself. That's really different with the Blazor server-side host, because if the server's is dead, or like if the server's having some performance issues, or the SignalR connection, like we already have a lot of people accessing the website and the SignalR connection is bad, all the clients on all the websites will suffer from it, because the connection from the backend to the front end is linked, right? Whenever I click a button, the server side will need to tell the client what will need to happen with the button itself. What else I can talk about the difference between them? The client side will probably be the one that survives. The first one was the server side and was the solution that they have to start like the Blazor development. But the worst thing of the server side app, it's really difficult to scale, because yes, you could use a SignalR, like because Azure itself provides a SignalR connection that is scalable, but like you're stuck with Azure, and like it's not even an ideal solution, because on a traditional way you would have your client being like, it's not dependent on the backend, and you will simply make an HTTP call and the backend itself is able to scale itself, being like you can create a serverless application. You can do like you can scale the application independently from the client, right? And when we are dealing with the server side, because we have this SignalR connection that connects the backend to the client, and this is not scalable in a way that traditional client applications are. It's really hard to create like a full application that will serve like tens of thousands of people using this server-side connection, comparing to the client-side one that you're able to scale the server independently of the client. Okay, I'll go to questions in the end. I wanted to show like a couple of my things first. I'll show right now to save a little bit of time. I created these applications beforehand. That I created a simple ToDo app using a client-side application and connecting with to a backend server. So maybe I can stop those. So I have 20 minutes. Okay, I can do it. I'll close this one, and I'll also close this one. So here, I just wanted to show the schema of things that I'll show it. Okay, so I have like an SQLite database running on my machine. I created a backend service using ASP.NET Core, but this could be used like using Java, using Ruby, using Node. I just created a way of how my applications would talk with my backend. So I created, I exported, like I created an API and a SignalR Hub connection that I'll talk a little bit more about it. But like I want to exemplify this, that this could be done with multiple technologies, and this is the Blazor side of things. I'll start with the client web app. So I'll just show what the backend server is. So I created like a simple backend application that is ASP.NET Core. If you watched our previous Hangouts that Gabriel did, like he did it way better than I did. I just like put some code and like it's working at least. But I created a couple of APIs. I created an API to like get the items from the database. So this is my SQLite server that has like one table with like ToDo items, and I created one to get all the data. I created one to add data and to remove data. And what my Blazor application will be doing is it will be making HTTP calls into this backend server, and I will react to it. So I started the server, and now I'll start my client-side application. One big benefit of using like those web frameworks is like, and it's not specific to Blazor, but like when we're dealing with Angular, React, Vue, all big web frameworks, we don't necessarily need to develop everything from the ground. So let's say I want to create a dashboard app using Angular. I won't necessarily need to create. If I want to, I can, but I don't need to create all the graphs myself. I don't need to create like the forms, the web components. I think it's easier to show it. So like there are multiple component libraries, for Blazor, being for other types of libraries, that we can use it instead of having to develop everything ourselves over and over again. And like this is one that I just googled the first one, and this one I just found it. I just wanted to exemplify this because I think it's important when we're dealing with these web frameworks to utilize like their full potential. And I believe like utilizing open source and like, or can be paid, but like utilizing ready-made components to make your development easier is a big part of it. So here, for example, I have a component library for Blazor. So someone, or like a couple of people probably, what they did was they created as we created like our previous, I'll show it again. So like we have on our client-side application, we created our please open faster. So we created our component, right? We created the super component Razor that had this kind of logic, and this one isn't that useful. But let's say we created a component that it will render a table, and you want to share it with people instead of them having to create the HTML all by themselves, right? So we would create a component library that we would share with people, saying, okay, instead of creating all the HTML and all the logic behind your table, just use our ready-made component and just pass the data as parameters. So here I just Google it like a component library for Blazor, and I like this Blazor Resin, I don't even know, but here we have like multiple components that can be used on our application. Let's say, for example, I wanted to use graphs on my app. I would use this component. I would download it as a NuGet package, right? And here they tell you how to use this component. So this library was the one that I'm using with this application. I have it here. So this was a super application that I created. Like it's a ToDo app that is talking with the database, and it will sync with the clients. I'll just show the application. Hopefully it will work, but like I'll show it and I'll go through the code. So if we edit here a new ToDo item, let's say Lucas, and like some DevOps thing, it will make an HTTP call to the database. It will update the database, and it will sync with all the clients. Oh, I didn't show it here, but it's synced. Okay, so I'll show it, and like the backend, it's not important, but we just wanted to show it here. We have APIs that will talk to the database, and the implementation we could create this API could also be utilized by an Angular application. So going back to our client. Okay, so here things are a little bit different, but the same. The concept is the same. We have our www root that I didn't even erase like the bootstrap, but we have our index page. And on our index page, instead of creating all the HTML here, I separated it into three different components. We have our welcome component, we have our add new item form component, and we have our ToDo table. They should be self-explanatory. The welcome component defines this top of the app. We have our add new item form component that is here, like it handles the logic of those two input fields at this button. And we have the table itself. I'll start with the easier one, that it's the welcome. And these components, I define them on a different library so they can be reused by different application. So what I did here, so I have like the welcome component, welcome.blazor, that again, this one's not that interesting. It only, it only has like the HTML for the ToDo app and like say, okay, the GitHub, so it has no code in it, and that's okay, right? The component itself doesn't necessarily need to have code. It's an easier way of having things organized and like not, not containerized, like separated on components. So then we have, I can show you the ToDo table, and the ToDo table I utilize like the Redsun data grid column. So instead of having to develop all the HTML myself, create the table, adjusting the theme of the table, I just grabbed I went into the website and I grabbed their table, and here I passed, okay, the data equals the ToDo item, and the columns are like this, and like how you use their component will differ from component library from another, but like the advantage here is I didn't have to think on how I want to create my table. I just passed the data that I got from my backend, and I passed into the table. So here we have like what the table itself is, right? We have like here is the HTML of the table, and here is the code that is executed on the component. So the code itself, we have this uninitialized async that will be called when the component is rendered. I think it's before it's rendered on the screen. I don't know, but like when the component is being initialized, it will call. So here it initializes SignalR, and I'll go back to it. But I just wanted to show like the load data. So what the load data is doing is making an HTTP call to my backend server that here is running locally. It's getting the data, and it's filling the ToDo items list, which is a list of ToDo items that I define here on my model class that only has like an ID, a person, and an item that is defined here. That is shown here. I have all those components being rendered at the table. And when this data is updated, right, we have here on the table, right, data equals this list. So for example, if I remove the code that updates the data, the table itself would be empty. So this is a way of like this load new data. Whenever it's called, it will make a call into the database and retrieve the data from there. What we have here that is I didn't talk about inject. I forgot. Okay, what we also can do on Blazor apps is instead of we can reuse components, but we can also reuse services and code. So let's say, for example, I have this HTTP client. This one is like system.net HTTP client, but I could also develop an abstraction for HTTP. I could also create like a login service. But instead of defining this code on every service, we can add it here on the import. So we are saying like import the HTTP servers. Using this application is using system.net.http. And on the component itself, I can just inject this component. It's using, I don't know if it's using ASP.NET Core dependency injection, but it's using some kind of dependency injection. And here we are injecting the HTTP, and we are able to use that to make a call. But that was, I remember, okay, so this is one thing, right? We are able to reuse both .NET libraries and the services that we create and inject them into the component. So this is a way of like, because separating, like if you are using HTTP, if you're making HTTP calls on multiple components and we want to create a different logic, we want to create an abstraction for our HTTP calls, we could abstract that logic into a different service and inject that service into the components themselves. And okay, now I'll talk about the SignalR connection. SignalR is what the Blazor service uses to communicate with DOM, the DOM, but SignalR also can be used on the Blazor side to communicate between the server and the client, not necessarily on the server side Blazor, but like could be created like using Angular. Like SignalR could be used. It's not a Blazor technology. SignalR can be used on using different web framework technologies. 8 minutes ago. So here, what I'm doing on my ASP.NET, on my backend, right? So on my server, I created a SignalR connection. It's not here. I created my SignalR hub. So here, like, and this is why I like SignalR, because it's really easy to connect, like, both the backend and server end. You don't need to use WebSockets. You don't need to understand, like, the server-side events. You can just use, like, the SignalR hub, and you can connect your backend with your frontend. So like I created this hub, which has like a function which has like this ToDo item sync, which whenever I call it, I just send to all the clients a message with the topic ToDo item sync. So here I created a hub and I registered this hub on the startup that's saying, okay, map this hub ToDo Hub on the URL ToDo Hub. And here on the client side, the only thing that I need to do to connect is I create an object hub connection, which again, like I didn't implement this. This is Microsoft SignalR client, like I just installed as a NuGet package, and I'm connecting to my backend application to the URL. Like this is my backend URL to the hub. And I'm saying, okay, I'm now creating a hub connection and I want to listen to events. So I want to receive, like, whenever I receive this ToDo item sync, which is broadcast to all which is broadcast to all clients whenever I call this method, I will load the data again, right? So whenever I receive this message, I will make an HTTP call to the backend and retrieve all the data. And this is one way of doing. Like for example, I could have passed the data that was being the way that I did here was I received the sync and I also made a call into the backend. But what I could also have done is on this sync message, I could also already have received the data that I need to update, but I decided to do it the other way. So what happened is whenever the back end, if we go back here to the database, I think it's here. Yeah, awesome. So I have this ToDo Hub, and I can inject an iHub context in order to call the functions from that hub. So I have my class here. It uses like entity framework core, like simple. It uses like a simple DB context. So what I have here, like this is the code that is called from, I can show it here, like the ToDo controller. I have like, for example, I have a post that adds a new item into the database. So here, this API is this one, right? So this API is this one, the add items. So whenever this is called, I will use the database service to add my ToDo items. So I will add to the database context, I will save the changes, and please, if you have doubts of this, watch Gabriel's Hangouts, because it's way better than me. I just did this to make it work. But after changing the database context, I call this method to notify all the clients using the hub context, right? So I notify all the clients using hub context, clients, all set and sync. It's basically the same code that I'm doing here. I could call the method, but I forgot and rewrote the code. But what I'm sending here, like whenever the database is updated, I'm sending to all clients that are connected to the SignalR connection, which are like, and whenever the component itself connects to the hub, whenever it's initialized, I'm sending to all the clients. I'm sending all the clients. Okay, the ToDo items was updated, right? Please sync it. And whenever it's syncing, and whenever that message reaches here, I make a call to the database and get all the items and update it. So this only like exemplifies how you could use, like how you could leverage the Blazor side and the SignalR client to create those types of real life time applications, again without necessarily needing to use JavaScript code. And it's like if there's multiple ways of doing it, like could be with JavaScript, could be with other technologies, but like it's really easy to create like these real-time lifetime applications with one code base, like only one type of language, and like utilizing the same libraries both on the back end and on the front end. Like it's similar to what Node.js did, but in my opinion better, because like we could utilize the identity. Like with Node.js, we're not able to exactly use the same libraries. We are like using similar libraries, and the code itself, like the libraries themselves are a little bit different because the runtime is different. With Blazor, we are using the identical, because right here, the HTTP run, right? This is the same HTTP client, like system.net HTTP client is the same HTTP client that is used on the back end, right? So there's no confusion, and like if you know how to use one, you're gonna be able to use the other one. And the last thing, 2 minutes, I'll probably go over time a bit. The last thing that I want to talk about is like reusing those Blazor components on different types of applications, different types of like, you could use those Blazor components on the Blazor, on the client side hosting model. You could use those components on a server side hosting model, but you could also use these components to create desktop applications. And I created a simple example using Electron.net. Electron.net uses it uses the we could create, like previously you could use Electron to create Angular applications to create desktop applications. So let's say, for example, my application itself wanna access files from the system. So that wouldn't be possible with Blazor because it's running on the browser, right? But with Electron, we are able to deploy that Blazor application on a Windows machine, for example. So what I did here, I created a server-side desktop app application that transforms my Blazor server-side app into a desktop app. And one big advantage is I used the same components that I used for my client-side application that is running on the browser to create the desktop application. So here, like, it's how can I show it's the same? Like I just referenced, like it could be referenced as a NuGet package. I just referenced it on my local machine. So this is where, I know I can. So if we go here, like on the welcome, because this one, like we have here like the welcome component, which is the same one as here. I think it will update, right? If I save it here, it will. Yeah, it updates here, right? It's the same code. I just referenced it into a different solution. So if we start our Electron app, what we'll do, like it will use Electron.net to create a desktop application, and all the code via like the SignalR code, the Blazor components, the code itself is the same. Where it's running is only different. So, and again, hopefully it will work. But like what we did is we created using a single code base with a single type of language like C#. We created a website that is and a backend server and a desktop application, and hopefully, yeah, everything is synced, right? So because they are all using like the same SignalR, the same connection. So if we add something here, test 1 2 3, it will post a message into our backend. And we'll notify all the clients that will be updated. So here, like the clients that are running on the browser were notified, and the clients that were running on the desktop were also notified, and all using the same components created only once, right? And yeah, I think that's cool. But I think that's it. I can try and answer some questions. Hopefully my audio was better, and you guys were able to hear me. Oh, and I closed it. I don't know if it will recover the questions. Does anyone have any question? If not, that's okay. Okay, I managed to stay under an hour, maybe a couple of minutes more. Hopefully everything went good. The code is on GitHub. It should work. I can share the links of Electron, but I think it's all on the README of the GitHub. Oh, does Blazor create a virtual DOM? Don't think so. I think it uses. Let me think. My answer should. I don't know, but my guess no. I can look it up, but if I understood it correctly, it shouldn't use like a virtual DOM. But I don't know. Sorry, I may be wrong. Was the audio better? Like your guys, I was checking my WhatsApp meeting, WhatsApp messages. Hopefully it was better. Oh, it's better now. Thank you. Does RDI have plans to use something like that on the new POS solution? I'm not sure if I can talk about RDI things since that's public, but we can talk it later, Hobson, and can give you some spoilers. But I'm not sure if it's. I don't know if I can, but we can talk it later. Can I talk about it? I don't know. And I don't know, like maybe I was too fast because I wanted to show a lot of things, and like I, I don't know, like if I should have spent more time explaining like the Razor components and everything, but like since I only had 1 hour and I wanted to show like all the applications and like what client side was, what server side was, the differences, the SignalR, maybe I should have cut a little bit, but all browser support, yeah, all, yes, yes. Because like the main difficulty of supporting would be like for the client side that would depend on WebAssembly, but right now all the major browsers support WebAssembly and it is like consolidated, so all browsers should accept it. We had a time that WebAssembly wasn't working properly on Internet Explorer, as always, but I think that's after Microsoft Edge. I think it's working right now. Okay, hopefully I was able to at least get more people interested on Blazor. I think like it's a cool technology. Like it's still in the beginning, right? Like there are a couple of like maybe 2 and 3 years that it was deemed production ready. I think it has a lot of potential. Like this method, like the C sharp, like utilizing C sharp like on both backend and front end, like that's a plus. But I really think like the technology of creating WebAssemblies and just the client side specifically, like I really think like it should be the future, right? But we'll see. I'll end the broadcast right now. Hopefully, if anyone, I remember like, if anyone has any doubts or like if they have doubts about the Hangouts platform itself, please contact me or Caroline. If you wanna do a Hangouts yourself, please contact us, and we are always looking for more people to do talks like this. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.